Hey friends, Elizabeth here from Plant-Based Bride, and I'm back again with another video. As you can see from the title, this one is a little different. I'm not setting up anything in my own bullet journal. I am actually setting up my husband's first ever bullet journal, and I am so excited about this. I've been trying to get my husband to have a bullet journal for literally years, and he finally caved and asked me to set it up for him, and I happily obliged. He also suggested I make it a video, which I thought was a great idea, and so did Dingbats, who were kind enough to send this wildlife notebook to us so that Jason could try it out. Their wildlife collection was their first collection of notebooks, and they let Jason pick the one he wanted. He really liked this brown bear notebook, so that's the one that he picked. So this was a little weird for me to approach because this was the first time I was ever setting up a bullet journal that wasn't for myself. And I wanted to make sure I was doing it in a way that would be practical and useful for him and not just something that I would want in my bullet journal, because we're different people, surprisingly, and we have different work situations and need different things. So what I wanted to do was have a little consultation with him. So we sat down in our bed with some coffee and chatted through what he wanted the bullet journal for, what he needed it to be able to do, and also aesthetically what he was looking for. So on the topic of aesthetics, I was expecting him to want something very, very minimal and just want me to do like black and white, very simple, not really have headers and things like that. But he actually surprised me and he wanted me to do something a little more decorative, and of his own accord he went and found swatches and sort of color palettes that he liked to send to me. I think he sent me 4 separate little color palettes, which I'll include on the screen if I can find them, but they were very sort of 70s inspired, mustard yellow and green and like a rusty red, burgundy, and some more teal blues and like cream, all of these colors that are very 70s, which I shouldn't have been surprised by because I obviously know my husband and I know the colors he likes and I know that he loves the 60s, 70s sort of vibe. As you can see underneath the journal, there's a very 70s style poster that says Saturn on it. It's like a futuristic sci-fi vintage looking poster, which I gave him for a gift about a year ago, and he has that up in his office. So I obviously already knew that that was kind of his aesthetic. Those were the colors he liked, but I didn't know he would want me to go full out 70s until we were talking about it in this consultation, and I realized that's exactly what he wanted. So this was really fun for me. I got to kind of do a 70s inspired setup, which is very different from anything I've done in my bullet journal. And I went through all of my Tombos and swatched a bunch of them that I thought were close to the colors he'd sent me, and then I had him look over the swatches and pick out the colors he wanted. And I think we ended up with 6 different Tombos. They'll all be listed in the description box along with every supply I use in this video. And I decided to use those colors as the color scheme. Now, as far as the practicality, what he really wanted it for, we talked about the different types of spreads you normally use in a bullet journal. I walked him through mine and sort of the spreads that I tend to like, and we talked about what he was using it for. So the first thing that he wasn't sure about was an index, and I recommended that he try to have an index just to stay a little more organized. So I did give him 1 page of an index, just kept it very, very simple. The font that I used for this header was the more minimalist of the 2 header styles I do throughout this video. So the next thing that we talked about was a future log. At first, he didn't think he wanted a future log, but once I actually explained to him what a future log was and what it was used for, he actually really did want one. And at first I was thinking he would want more of a year at a glance, just a place to see all the dates and maybe just a little bit of space to add important dates. But after looking at my future log, he actually wanted the same setup that I had, but just keeping it to 6 months. So 1 2-page spread because he didn't think he would need a full year. So that's what we did. I actually set up essentially the exact same future log as I just did in my own bullet journal setup, which I did a couple weeks ago. If you want to see that video and haven't already, I'll link it in a card. But it's basically the same setup of my future log. I just did the headers, obviously, in a different style for what he was looking for. So the main header I did in the little bit more intricate and more overtly 70s font, and then I did the individual month headers in that slightly more minimalist 70s font. And on these first 2 spreads, I was just incorporating the yellow Tombow. That's the color I used the most throughout, just to have a through line of color. And then the monthly spread is the one that has the pop with all of the colors that he selected. This style of star makes me think very much of like the 50s through the 70s, depending on the style and how it's incorporated into a look. So I wanted to include those as well. So speaking of this really cool, funky 70s style hand lettering I'm doing on a lot of these headers, this was actually inspired by a font called The Beardy. And I found this font as part of a bundle on thehungryypeg.com. It's called the Outstanding October Bundle, and it is 39 fonts and 11 graphics for just $29, which is kind of ridiculous. You can also get an extra 10% off if you share the bundle on Twitter or Facebook. So it's really an incredible deal if you're into graphic design, if you have a project you're working on, or if, like me, you like to use fonts to practice your hand lettering. So something I love to do is to find a new interesting font that I really like the look of, and then I will purchase that font, download it, type out a bunch of different words or the alphabet in the font and see how each letter is constructed, and then I'll play around with recreating the font as closely as I can on my own. And then also, once I feel like I've kind of mastered that, I will shift it so that I'm creating my own version of the font. So fixing a couple things here and there that I would do differently, changing thicknesses, changing the spacing between the letters, or the style of the S, or whatever it is that appeals to me. And this is a great way to practice different types of hand lettering, to get inspired, to try different things with your hand lettering, and just to improve it in general. So go check out the bundle if you're interested. It is only available for another 23 days. I will leave a link down in the description so you can go see it. It includes the Beardy if you like this funky font, but also, like I said, 38 other fonts and 11 graphics. And some of the other fonts are really ridiculously gorgeous. So you know I'm gonna be practicing using a lot of those fonts. So next we are moving on to the monthly spread. This is the next spread that he definitely needed. And again, we talked about different types of calendars he could have. And he said that he wanted the same kind that I have, more of a traditional calendar that has enough space in every box to add multiple things, because he is a freelancer and he can have multiple jobs or multiple gigs in a day, and he needs to have the room to add in all of the different places he has to be and the times so that he has that information and can keep on top of it and keep organized. So I did the same dimensions that I did in my notebook. I did 6 by 6 boxes for the days, but I actually decided to slide the whole calendar further up the page than how I'd done it in my notebook so that I could actually do the header at the bottom. Because we only have the 5 rows on the left page and the Thursday, Friday, Saturday, those 3 on the right side, don't have a 5th row, I thought that would be the perfect place to add the header. So I shifted the whole calendar up. I put the days of the week along the bottom instead of the top where I normally do it, and then did that 70s style header for October along the bottom. Next was the part I was pretty much most excited about, which was doing sort of a classic 70s muted color rainbow between the 1 and the 7, because there's that little box cut out of the calendar. I thought that was the perfect place to do a little rainbow, and I used all of the colors that he selected in the rainbow. I then reused those colors to highlight the top section of each row of the weeks so that each week has its own color, and it helps a little more to differentiate between each week. The only color I didn't use on that would be the beige, because I did have 6 colors and only 5 rows, but the beige is pretty close to the color of the page, so I didn't feel like we were really missing out on that one. I added the little stars around the header as well to keep that through line going. And then I was faced with a dilemma, because I was looking at this completed spread and I felt like something was missing and I couldn't really figure out what it was. And I literally sat there while I was recording, staring at the page for probably 5 minutes, trying to figure out what I wanted to do on the right side of the page, because I really felt like it needed something. I toyed with a quote. I was trying to think of different patterns I could do, drawings I could do. And eventually I had an idea of doing just a very simple sort of graphic design along the side. And I decided to do 2 graphic thick black lines crossing with a little circle incorporating the yellow and the sort of olive green to give the impression of the sort of graphic design that was really common, especially in advertising in the 70s. So I really liked that. It kept it very simple, but I just liked that it filled in that side of the page and added a little bit of darkness as well, because there's so much color in the spread and there really aren't any thick black lines. I liked adding that sort of graphic touch to the side. So the last spread that he wanted was a weekly, and he needed his weeklies to serve a little bit of a different purpose than I need mine to serve me. So while they were kind of still based on the same idea as my weeklies, which are rolling weeklies or running task lists, he wanted something a little bit different. So I still set it up for him with the days of the week along the left page, just enough room to really write events. So gigs that he's doing, where he has to be at what time during that day, little reminders he needs for that day. And then the right side is for notes. For me, the right side of the page is my task list. And he said he didn't need room for a task list. He just wanted 3 pages worth of empty pages that he could write notes on. He could write down feedback from an artist on a mix that he'd done. He could write down ideas for sound design for a show, whatever he needs it for during that week. And then that way he can also find notes pretty easily when he thinks about when he was working on a project. He can find the notes on that project because he knows what week he was working on it. So that's exactly what I did for him. I gave him his events and then 3 empty pages for the week for whatever he needs it for. Now, the one other different thing that you'll see is that column that's in the middle of the page. This is for him specifically because he is a freelancer. He has had trouble in the past being able to keep track of billable hours and how many hours worked for how many different companies or individuals in a week, and being able to track that accurately so he can do his invoices. So that was something we talked about extensively, and what we came to was a pretty simple setup, but something that I think is going to be really effective. So he told me that he would never be working for more than 3 separate companies or individuals in a day, so he only needed 3 spots per day. So I used that to figure out how I would split up the page, and I gave him 3 rows for every day to track his hours. So you'll see along the top, there's a C, an H, and a $sign. So the C is for company. So that's for him to write in the initials or just a little short form of the name of the company he's working for or the theater or the individual so that he can keep track of that for invoicing purposes. And then the next column is the H for hours. So that's where he can write how many hours he worked for that specific company in that day. And then the $sign column is the amount of money earned. So for example, if he worked for 10 hours for company A, making $10 an hour, he would write $100 in that column. Obviously, he doesn't work for $10 an hour, but that was the easiest example I could think of in a split second. So he has room to do that for 3 separate companies in the day, and then at the bottom there, those 2 boxes just below the H and the $sign are for the totals for the day. So if he worked 10 hours for company A, 12 hours for company B, and 2 hours for company C, then he can add those up and realize he worked, okay, 10, 12, and 2, that's 24 hours total in the day. That's just for him to be able to keep track generally of how many billable hours he's working every single day. And then the next spot is for the total dollars earned in that day. So over the course of the entire day with all of the different people he worked for, how much money did he earn? So that little setup for the day repeats every day of the week, so he can fill out that information and keep track of it. And then you'll see at the very bottom, after all 7 days, on the Saturday, there's actually a second totals row, which is beige instead of yellow, and that row is for the weekly totals. So I wanted him to have a space to track the total billable hours worked in the entire week, and then also the total amount earned in the week. So I repeated that weekly setup for all of the remaining weeks in October. So that is the setup. It's pretty straightforward and pretty simple. I'm really excited about it. I'm really happy with how it turned out, and I can tell you from the reveal that he is also very happy about it. I'm really hoping that this is going to make a big difference for him and that it's going to help him stay more organized and be less stressed, because he just knows that he has his schedule at his fingertips. He knows where he has to be and when, and he also has all the information he needs for his invoicing and doesn't have to search through texts and emails and things to figure out how many hours he worked somewhere. This video is pretty short and sweet compared to some of my videos. I hope you enjoyed this video. Give it a like if you did. It's definitely something a little different for me, but I had a lot of fun. While I did feel a lot of pressure to make something my husband would love, I did have a lot of fun putting this together. And while I won't be showing flip-throughs of his journal since it's his and it's personal to him and I don't really want to share that to the internet, he is willing to have me film monthly setups if that's something you are all interested in. So let me know in the comments below if you want to see more setups in my husband's bullet journal, because I have a feeling that the setups are going to be a little different from what I normally do in mine as far as themes go, especially because he has his own sort of aesthetic. And while we share a lot of interests. I probably never would have done this as a theme in my own bullet journal, so it's really fun to be able to set it up in his. So let me know in a comment if you want to see me do bullet journal setups in my husband's bullet journal on a monthly basis as well, because that's definitely something I could do. This was a really cool experience for me because my husband is my best friend in the entire world and my soulmate, and I love making things for him and doing things for him, and it felt really awesome to make something for him that I hope, fingers crossed, will make his life easier every single day, because doesn't everyone want to be able to give the people they love an easier life? So that was really cool for me. And thank you for hanging out with me and sharing in the experience. I hope it was fun for you. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already, because next week's video is a very exciting one. I am collabing with another bullet journal YouTuber who is really awesome, and I think you folks are gonna love it. So be sure to subscribe and also turn on post notifications. That way you know when the video goes live, because as I promised, I'm going to be doing a giveaway in my November plan with me, and you want to have your notifications on so you can enter right away. Thank you again to Dingbats for sending us this notebook. My husband is so excited about it. And now that we have both a wildlife journal and an earth collection journal in the same household, I'm going to try to do a little bit of a comparison of the two notebooks in my Dingbats review, which will be coming at some point. I'm not sure when, but it's coming. If you're still here and looking for something to watch, I have a lot of bullet journal videos on my channel, so go ahead and watch some of them. There's some great ones. Last week was a flip through of my completed journal from January to September of this year. The video before that was my October plan with me. The video before that was my new bullet journal setup. And then there's a bunch of other videos up there with different types of spreads and different monthlies and all kinds of stuff. So go check it out. And I'll see you next week. Bye, friends.